Hello ladies, it is Tiffany of Clarity, Confidence, Courage, Women's Empowerment, and today I want to talk about how childhood trauma affects your relationships. Now I know this is a very sensitive topic, so I want to make sure I give a trigger warning because some of the things that I'll be talking about in this video may be very triggering if you have had a lot of childhood trauma or dealt with a lot of abusive situations. So definitely, if it's too much for you, this might be the time to leave. But for the rest of you who want to watch, I'm going to be talking about some sensitive topics that probably are going to bring up some emotions for you. But these are probably emotions that you need to have in order to understand why your relationships keep turning out negatively, or why you've isolated yourself because you're afraid to be in a relationship. So stay tuned. As always, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Now let's get into this. Now, to get started, I want to talk about this because I have literally met women who, of course, have gone through a divorce and have been single and living alone for years and years and years. And they're perfectly fine, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But part of the issue, or the reason that they've chosen to pretty much live a very isolated life, is because during their marriage, they went through so much trauma, they literally couldn't imagine themselves allowing someone to get that close to them again, or go through, such a vulnerable situation where they allow someone into their life that closely. So they would rather be alone than to have to deal with another human being in their life, other than their children. So I wanted to bring this up again because I've met so many amazing, successful, smart women that are still going through issues related to childhood trauma. And they don't really understand why. That they're trying to figure out, why can't they be vulnerable and let someone in their life, after their divorce? Or why are they still single and can't seem to bring in a healthy, happy relationship? And so what I wanted to talk about is this concept of what childhood trauma is and how it can affect you all the way into adulthood. So to start off, let's talk about childhood trauma. Childhood trauma is any serious, life-threatening event that evokes fear. It evokes, a feeling of hypervigilance. It evokes a feeling of scarcity. It evokes feelings of lack. Childhood trauma can be on such a wide spectrum. You can experience physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, physical neglect, meaning, maybe your parents didn't feed you or didn't eat you. Didn't give you any food to eat, so you might experience malnourishment. It could also be living in pure filth. Your parents didn't take care of you when you were a child. Childhood trauma can also be watching a family member be abused, whether it's a parent by another parent, or a parent by a friend, or a parent by a child. Childhood trauma can also be having to grow up at an early age. So you have a parent that is an alcoholic or a drug addict, and you're having to take care of your siblings and pretty much be the parent because they physically can't do it, or they're so emotionally withdrawn because of their own depression that they couldn't be there for you, and therefore you have to basically run the household and take care of your siblings. That can form childhood trauma. Childhood trauma can also be if you were, during your childhood, your developmental years, being moved around a lot, whether that was from foster home to foster home, or, family member's house to family member's house, in and out of places, just going through a lot of transitional phases and not being in a stable environment. Childhood trauma can also be circumstances where you experience life-threatening events like a natural disaster, or a circumstance where your house burns down or you have to be homeless for a short period of time. These are all traumatic events. And childhood trauma could even be things, for example, like constantly being criticized and put down and yelled at or verbally abused, again, by a parent or family member or guardian. That is also childhood trauma. Or you can have some type of a passive aggressive communication style where when things don't work out for you, you automatically shut down. You're not willing to confront the issue. You're not willing to talk to the person, but you are aggressively internally angry. You're walking around, you're doing other things to show a certain level of aggression and resentment, but you're being passive to the issue and you're not really discussing how you feel. So those are some ways that childhood trauma can affect your communication style. Childhood trauma can also contribute to what's called our attachment styles. And there are so many different attachment styles, and that is really a conversation for a whole other video. But just to kind of give you an example, there are several different attachment styles. The best attachment style to have is the secure attachment style. And what this means is that you grew up in a home where as a child, there was a level of comfort, care, and security. Your parents paid you attention, they talked to you, they gave you safety. You felt like safe. You felt like you grew up in a healthy environment. So as you grow up and you begin to emulate relationships, they look like the relationships that you had probably with your parents or your caregivers in that healthy environment. You know how to regulate your own emotions. You confront issues when they come up. You're not afraid to express yourself. You're willing to listen to others. These are different, examples of what it means to have a secure attachment style. So when you get in relationships, you feel secure. You're not always calling the person or thinking that they're cheating. You're calm, you're collected, you're peaceful, and you give that person the space that they need to be themselves. And there's a level of interdependence. So that is considered a secure attachment style, and that's what you want to have. But a lot of times when you go through a traumatic childhood, you don't have a secure attachment style. You have some of these that I'm about to name. First, the dismissive avoidant attachment style. So a lot of times people that have the avoidant attachment styles grew up in homes where their parents didn't give them the emotional attention they needed. They weren't heard, they weren't listened to, they weren't given a safe space to express themselves. So in the avoidant attachment style, when you grow up and you get older, you pretty much mimic the same thing. People can't get close to you, and the moment you feel like someone is getting close to you, you run away, you shut them down. Ladies, you know these relationships, you get into them, and the moment someone tries to get close to you, they try to make you feel safe and feel vulnerable because it's so opposite of what you know. You avoid, you shut down, you ghost them, you run away. These are considered avoidant attachment styles. Now, the other attachment style that is unhealthy is the anxious or preoccupied attachment styles. These are a lot of times during childhood trauma where a child, because their needs aren't getting met, or they're getting met sometimes, but it's inconsistent, or maybe they grew up in a situation where they moved around a lot or they were homeless. There's situations when a child is in distress or they just need that emotional support. The parent isn't consistent. There's no consistent behavior. So the child grows up to become this person that's always a little bit hyper vigilant and on edge about everything. A lot of times they're emotionally needy. They need to feel that someone is going to be with them all the time, and they need to be constantly reassured that they're okay or they're enough, or they're being supported, because they didn't get that as a child. They didn't get that positive reinforcement. So as an adult in relationships, ladies, if you are a kind of very insecure, this needy, edgy attachment style, it'll look kind of like if you're in a relationship and you're constantly calling someone, you're constantly asking them where they are and what they're doing. And if they don't text you back within 5 minutes, you're calling them constantly and saying, why didn't you text me back? I just text you. And why? So there's this feeling of neediness. There's this feeling of anxiousness because you're worried that the person is going to leave you, or the worried that the person is going to, not give you the affection that you're giving them. So there's this fear of loss. And this happens a lot, with children where, a parent abandons the child. Parents get divorced and they never see the other parent again. Or, a parent dies at an early age. So a lot of times in those situations, you can have an anxious attachment style. And lastly, childhood trauma can induce mental health disorders. You can either grow up in a situation where you were abused, you went through a lot, and you already had maybe a predisposition to a mental health disorder like depression or bipolarism or anxiety. And then as you get older, it just starts to get worse because you're still wrapped up in the childhood trauma cycle, or you keep attracting people that re-traumatize you. So a lot of times when you experience childhood trauma, it can be the beginning of you getting a mental disorder, or if you already were predisposed to having a mental disorder, it only gets worse. And not just mental disorders, but also health issues. A lot of times when you are going through childhood trauma and you're going through that kind of unstable, neglectful, issues with your life, you grow up to be an sometimes unhealthy person physically, whether it's, developing an eating disorder like anorexia, or on the flip side, obesity, or, just not taking care of your own health. So childhood trauma can affect you in so many ways. And of course, this then leads to bad relationships. So of course, all the things that I name, ladies, because of childhood trauma when it comes to relationships, can lead you to either be with people that abuse you when you get older. It can lead you to people that are neglectful. It can lead you to people that, they're in and out. They really don't give you the support that you need. It can lead you to people that might actually be fairly healthy, but because you're so unhealthy, you deflect them. They end up not wanting to be in a relationship with you because you're so needy, or you're so avoidant, or there's some extremeness to your personality. So childhood trauma, can pretty much run and ruin our entire lives if we don't get a hold on them. We attract truly what we are. And a lot of times when you go through childhood trauma, you still have that inner child inside of you that hasn't dealt with those emotions, that hasn't healed. There's a part of you that's still the wounded child. There's a part of you that's still the child that was emotionally neglected. There's a part of you that's still that child that had to take care of yourself. So you had to shut down all of a part of yourself and not be vulnerable to people. So when you grow up and you get older, you attract the relationships or the non-relationships that you saw growing up in your household. You attract someone that's going to abandon you. You attract someone that's going to abuse you. You attract someone that wants you to be vulnerable, and yet you won't be vulnerable with them. You attract the people that really won't support you or give you what you need. These are ways that childhood trauma can affect your adult relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but also friendships. Sometimes you attract those narcissistic, manipulative people because you grew up in a household with narcissistic, manipulative parents or narcissistic, manipulative siblings. So just understand that childhood trauma really shapes our adult lives. So how do you get past having your childhood trauma affect your relationships? Well, first things first, ladies, you have to recognize that you went through a traumatic childhood. I meet so many women who, come to me for coaching, and we're talking about the issues that they're having in their life. And they're like, yeah, I don't know why this keeps happening. And these are smart, intelligent, successful women on the outside, right? They have the great jobs, they have beautiful homes. On the outside, it looks like they have themselves together, but for whatever reason, they're going through a divorce, or they can't get into a good relationships, or they have these terrible friendships and they don't know why. And when I start to really help them unpack their childhood and they're able to look back, it's like, oh, well, that's probably the beginning of you understanding dysfunctional behavior in your childhood. But until someone is able to call it out, they don't know it's dysfunctional. You see, when you grow up in a dysfunctional situation or an unhealthy situation, you think it's normal because it's all you've ever known. So your brain literally says, this is normal. So if you watched your father, physically abuse your mother, and then you get into a physical abusive relationship with a person, for a good bit of time, you're probably saying, it's not fun, but this is kind of what my mom went through. This is just what men do. This is just how men are. Your mind rationalizes that behavior. So a lot of times, the first step of getting past childhood trauma and understanding how it's affecting you is recognizing that you went through it, and stop trying to defend family members who abused you. I also meet so many women who are so hooked on defending their family members and thinking that if they say anything bad about them, that means that they don't love them. And the truth is, You acknowledging that you went through a traumatic childhood does not negate the fact that you love your family, or you love your mother, or you love your father, or your siblings. It just recognizes the fact that some of the experiences that you had were not healthy for you. It wasn't healthy for you as a child, and it's not healthy for you as an adult. So you can still love your family, but also acknowledge that some of the things that they did hurt you. So the first thing is understanding how to recognize that you went through a childhood traumatic situation. The next thing to do is have compassion for yourself. Stop trying to push yourself so hard to make things work out, make things happen. You go into your relationships and your life like you do everything else. At work, you work hard and you get results. At the gym, you work hard and you get results. So if you just work harder at this really horrible relationship, it's gonna change. And I'm telling you, it's not gonna change, because the real work is by going to therapy for yourself and healing yourself. It's not about continuing to do what you've been doing in a relationship that is not working. It's not about chasing someone. It's not about calling someone 10 times a day. It's not about changing your hair and your makeup. It's about you doing the internal healing work. So have compassion for yourself and understand that you just have to relax. You have to recognize that you're going through something. And the next step is to reach out for help. You have to get therapy. You have to do the inner work. You have to be with someone that can be objective, meaning they're outside of the picture. They didn't grow up in your household. They're looking at what you're telling them, and they're able to help you pinpoint certain things that you probably couldn't see because you're in the frame. You're inside of it. You're in the family. So you can't understand what is functional, what is normal, because all you know, your normal is what you grew up with. So no matter how horrible it was normal to you. And it's not until someone, a therapist, is sitting there and talking to you and can help you see this was your childhood. However, this is what a normal, healthy, secure childhood looks like. And yours didn't look like that. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you went through some circumstances that got you tangled up mentally and emotionally. And now you have to be willing to unpack and untangle those things in order to have a healthy adult life. And lastly, it takes time. Being in a healthy, secure relationship is about you becoming a healthy, secure person within yourself. When you get to that point where you're healed, where you get to that point where you're no longer vigilant and anxious or depressed or worried or, avoidant or scared or whatever the issue is, that is when you're in a place where you can then start having healthy relationships, because now you are bringing into your life people that in many ways mimic your behavior. You know the difference between functional and dysfunctional. You can spot it now because you've gotten the help. Whereas before, you went back to the people that made you feel comfortable. They made you feel secure because that behavior was the behavior that you learned in childhood. When we grow up in traumatic, dysfunctional situations, no matter how bad it is, we get comfortable with it because it's normal for us. We can breathe in that dysfunctional, polluted world because that's all we know. But when we clean ourselves up and we heal, that is no longer normal for us, and that's no longer what we have to accept. So then once you're healed, once you understand what that looks like, what that feels like, what kind of world that is, now those are the types of people you attract into your life, because you can spot the bad ones and you can spot the ones that are better. And the ones that are better are the ones that you will gradually go towards, because now you're healed. So I wanted to do this video because I talk to so many women who, go through traumatic situations, and when they become adults, they sweep it under the rug and say, that's over, that's in the past, I'm moving on. I have this great life on the outside, but they keep manifesting different experiences that are negative, and they don't know why, especially in their relationships. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you're interested in learning more and working with me one-on-one as a life coach, as a women's life coach, I am open to taking new clients right now. Just click on the link in the description and let's have a free discovery call and see if working together might be the best next steps. Guys, it's always a pleasure to do these videos to help you move forward. I get so many awesome comments. Keep them coming. Continue to comment, continue to share, and continue to like. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.